Hey guys, today we're going to be looking at number lines and specifically where to put fractions on a number line or how to figure out what each hash means with a fraction. Earlier this year, we looked at number lines when we were doing our line plot and our data unit, and we learned in that unit that we need to have a scale with our number line. And in that scale, it needs to start at some whole number, end at some whole number, and there needs to be a consistent interval going across the number line. So every hash has to be an equal distance apart. And when we were doing it earlier this year, most of our intervals were 1. So because all of our line plots that we were making were in whole numbers. Sometimes we had halves, so we might have been at 50, 50 and a half, 51. So for today's lesson, we're going to focus specifically on fractions and what does each hash mark in fractions and how to identify that. And then we'll end the lesson with looking at how to make a line plot, number line, from a blank line and picking the appropriate scale and interval as we make that, depending on what fractions we're given. Okay, so we're going to get started. Okay, so the number line that you see starts at 0. Starts at 0 and ends at 1. So we need to figure out what fractional piece is between 0 and 1. So when we look at this, we want to first start with, okay, well, how many sections is that whole number divided into? So it is divided into 1, 2, 3, 4 equal sections. And in those 4 equal sections, it's cut by 3 hash marks. So 3 hash marks makes 4 equal sections. So then each one of these hashes is going to be 1/4. So this very first one will be 1/4. The second one will be 2/4. And the third one will be 3/4. So one thing we need to be aware of, we know that fractions sometimes have equivalents. So we can also talk about how 1/4 could also be known as 2/8. 2/4 is 4/8. And 3/4 is 6/8. Now, the specific way of looking at this number line is in fourths, but we need to be aware that each of those fourths is also equivalent to something else. So if I said, hey, where's 2/8 at on this number line? Well, we would put a marking at 1/4 because 1/4 and 2/8 are equal. So now that we've identified what the hashes mean on this number line, we can identify that the dot is at 3/4 or 6/8. Those are equivalent, but specifically it's at 3/4. Okay, so let's look at our next one. Okay, so once again, we're between 0 and 1. So we needed to look at how many sections are between 0 and 1. So I see 1, 2, 3 hash marks, which means that's being divided into 4 sections. So this dot right here, we're going to put a label underneath it, and our label would be 1/4. This would be 2/4 and 3/4. We know that because 0 is 0/4 and 1 is at 4/4. So 0/4, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. And our dot is at 1/4. And once again, the idea is if I said, hey, where's 6/8? You could say, oh, that's right here on this number line because 6/8 and 3/4 are at exactly the same spot. Okay, looking at this one. What I want you to do is pause the video for a second and figure out where exactly is this dot. So first you're going to figure out how many sections it's divided into, what would each hash be, and then where specifically is this dot. And when you're ready, go ahead and hit play again. Okay guys, so this dot is at, well, first we got to figure out what's our denominator. By how many sections is this number line divided into? So I'm seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections between 0 and 1, which means that each one of these is 1/6. So this is 0/6, this is 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, also known as half, 4/6, 5/6, and 6. Sorry, not 7/6, 6/6. So our dot is at 1/6. Hopefully you had that right. So let's try another one. Okay, guys, pause. Figure out where this point is, and then hit play in order to see the answer. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sections between 0 and 1, which means each of these hashes is worth 1/8. So this hash is 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. This dot is at 5/8. Okay, so let's go and do another one. Oh, different one this time. Now we have a scale from 0 to 3. Our dot is between 1 and 2. So this is going to be a mixed number. So our first mixed number here. So we need to look between either 0 and 1 or 1 and 2 to figure out how many sections are in here to figure out what the hashes are worth. So I'm going to look between 0 and 1. Okay, so between 0 and 1, there's 1, 2, 3 sections, which means each hash is 1/3. So this is 1/3, this is 2/3, this is 3/3, this is 4/3, also known as 1 and 1/3, which makes this 1 and 2/3. So our dot is at 1 and 2/3. Okay, guys, figure out what this point is. Pause the video until you know, and then come back and check your answer. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections. So each one of these is worth 1/6. So 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6. This is at 5/6. Okay, we're just going to keep on going through here. Ooh, we have a dot between 3 and 4 here. Between each of these whole numbers is 1 hash, dividing each whole number into 2 sections. So between 0 and 1, we have 2 sections, which means each section is 1/2. So this is 1/2. This is 1 and 1/2, 2 and a half. So our dot is at 3 and a half. That one was pretty easy. Okay, guys, now we're into what do we do if we're asked to make our own number line with certain points on it. Okay, and so far we've looked at all points that had a common denominator, but I'm going to throw some unlike denominators at you, and we're going to talk about how we would figure out where to place those on a number line. Okay, so here are my values that I want to get onto a number line. I want to have 7/8, 1 1/2. Oops, sorry guys. Sorry about that, guys. Mr. Lehman just came home and the dogs went crazy, and then my computer screen went weird, but here we go. So anyway, we're going to plot several things on our number line. So our first one is 7/8. Our second value is 1 1/2. Then we have 1 3/4 and 2 1/8. Okay, so as you see, I have a denominator of 8ths, halves, fourths, and eighths again. So because I need to have a scale that is a consistent interval, I need to make sure that I have the correct amount of hashes for each of these to be plotted exactly on the number line. So when I look at this, I have to think about common denominator and which one of these denominators is going to be on the number line for each thing. So when I think about 7/8, okay, well, I can't reduce 7/8 to anything. So 7/8 has to specifically be on the number line. When I look at 1 1/2, that can be the same thing as 1 4/8. So then I look at 1 3/4. Oh, I can change that to 1 6/8. And 2 1/8 can just stay because I can't reduce it or change it to anything else. So it looks like my scale is going to have to be made with hashes at every 8th. So I'm going to need a scale from 0 the whole way through to 3, and then between each of the whole numbers, I'm going to have 7 hashes so that each section is divided into 8 parts. So I'm going to start with the whole numbers. I'm going to do that. Let me see here. I'm going to make little hashes here. You're going to try to make it as consistent as possible, but we'll see what happens here. Okay, so there's 0. There's 1, a little crooked there, sorry about that, 2, and 3. Do a little adjusting here. I'm going to slide that one a little bit. Okay, those look pretty consistent across. Okay, so I'm going to put labels here. So this is 0, this is 1, 2, and 3. Now, between each of those, I need to have 7 hashes. Okay, so I'm going to do that with my pen because it's probably going to be easier to write that out in pen than try to do that with the little hash line. So I need 7 sections. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now you can see they're not totally consistent, and I don't expect you guys to be perfect either. Just try to do your best when making your hashes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now between each of our whole numbers, it's divided into 8 sections because when we need 8 sections, we have to do 7 marks to make those 8 sections. Now that I have my number line created from 0 to 3 with my hashes at the 8ths, now I can go ahead and plot my points. So I need a point at 7/8. So that's going to be between 0 and 1, and I need to put it exactly at 7/8. So I have 0/8, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7/8 is right there. So I'm going to plot it, and I'm going to label it. Okay, and 7/8 has been plotted. Now I need a point at 1.5. Well, we know that 1.5 is equivalent to 1 4/8. So I'm going to start at 1, and I'm going to find 4/8. So there's 1, 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. So this is 1.5. Okay, and I am going to label it as 1.5, not 1 4/8, because we were supposed to plot 1.5, not 1 4/8, but we know that 4/8 is where it belongs. Okay, our next one is 1 3/4, and we know that 3/4 is equivalent to 6/8, so I'm going to plot a point at 1 6/8. So we already have a point here at 1.5, or 1 4/8, so then 5/8, 6/8. So 1 3/4 is being plotted right there. And our last point is at 2 1/8, so that has to be between 2 and 3. And so starting at 2, 1/8 is right next to that. So we're going to plot it and label it as 2 1/8. Okay, so we're going to go and do another one of these. So fresh number line. And what I would like you guys to do is take a whiteboard, and I would like you to draw a number line on it, and then I'm going to have you try to plot the numbers that I write for you. Okay, so here's what I want you, values that I want you to put down. I want you to plot 5/8. I want you to plot, let's go 2/4, 1 1/4, and let's do 1 let's go 3/8. Okay, so I want you to hit pause, go ahead and grab a whiteboard, and I want you to draw out this line, put the whole numbers on it, the hashes, and plot those 4 points. When you're finished, come and show it to me, please. And that's the end of the lesson. So after you've shown this to me, you can clean everything up, and hopefully that helped you with a little bit of beginning knowledge of number lines. Tomorrow we're going to look at a video where we are continuing to make fractions on a number line, but we're also going to then put our X's on it to make line plots. Okay, so see you tomorrow.